What's up, guys? So today we're just going to be going over the electrical system here in my truck, as far as the dual battery system, the solar panel, and the fuse panel in the back. So first, to start it, we're just going to go inside and I'm going to start drawing all this stuff out on the paper, and we're kind of be going back and forth where I draw it out so you can kind of get a idea of what it's like, and then I'll come and show you what it looks like actually on the truck. So let's go inside first. Okay, and on the drawing board here, really quick, we're going to go over one of the most important parts is your type of wire. So you're basically going to find two types of wire when you're looking. You're going to find OFC and you're going to find CCA. OFC is oxygen-free copper. CCA is copper-clad aluminum. Now, we're not really going to go explain this really heavily, but OFC is what you want. You do not want this. You do not want copper-clad aluminum. It does not conduct as well. You're gonna have voltage drops. You're just gonna have way more issues with the CCA than the OFC. I had this copper-clad aluminum when I first started this system, and I had all kinds of issues like voltage drops, like things just were not working. Switched to the oxygen-free copper and everything works great now. This stuff is a lot more expensive. It's almost like twice as expensive, but this is one area you can't skimp. Like if you're gonna do this, get the oxygen-free copper wires. Really simple to find. You just search OFC wire with whatever gauge you need on Amazon, Google, whatever, and you're gonna find it. It's gonna come up, and then I would click on the reviews and read the reviews, make sure the reviews are good, and make sure people are saying this is indeed OFC. That's very important. Okay, now we're gonna just really quick go over our two battery system. This system here is going to charge off your alternator running, so you don't need any. You could do just this without the solar panel. I know I have a solar panel and this. It's nice to have both, but you could, I started out with just doing the two battery system, and it does work well. Really simple. You have your starter battery, which is underneath your hood. You have the positive and negative. When you do this, I recommend disconnecting the negative of your battery. That will make it so there's no way to connect the circuit when you're working underneath your truck or vehicle on accident. If you just disconnect it, that makes it a lot safer. Your second battery, mine is underneath the hood. You could put this anywhere. This system is going to work. It doesn't matter where the second battery is. The only thing that's going to matter for that is the gauge wire you use if it's far away. The positives are going to be connected, and now they're going to be connected through a solenoid. We'll get into that, how that functions in a little bit, but first we'll go to the negatives of the battery. So your starter battery, if you don't know this, is always grounded to the frame of your truck. So the negative wire comes off your battery and it is grounded to frame. That's the frame or engine block of your truck. That's what it is grounded to. And all your electronics in your vehicle, for the most part, the negative from those electronics go somewhere to the frame of your truck. They do not go back to the battery. If you look on your battery, you'll see there's a lot of connections on the positive side and there's very few on the negative. That's because most of the negatives in your truck go to the frame, because this is already grounded to the frame. So since the frame is conductive, the steel in your truck, connecting it to the frame also connects it to the starter battery. That's how that works. And this system, when you hook these up, you could also hook the negative of the second battery to the negative of the starter battery. That works. But what I did, and what makes it much easier, is you also ground this to the frame. And I'll show you why later, why that just makes it easier. So two ways to do it. This is the way I recommend. The negatives, just ground the negatives to the frame. Really simple to do. We'll go out in the truck and kind of look at different points where they're grounded, but that's basically the gist of it. Okay, so now that we have the basic concept for this down, we're going to talk about this wire. So this wire needs to be either 4 or 6 gauge wires, pretty heavy gauge wire, because of the current flowing through it.
You want to make sure it's a wire that can hold up to the amount of amps that are going to be going through it. Now, I don't know all the intricacies of how many amps are running through this thing. I just know that it needs to be either 4 or 6 gauge wire. Whether it's 4 or 6 is going to depend on how far this battery is away from this battery. So as this amount of wire gets longer, there's going to be voltage drops in this system. So to kind of make that less, what you're going to do is use a bigger gauge wire. So that would be 4. 4 gauge wire is bigger than 6 gauge wire. I know it doesn't really make sense. I don't know why they made wire gauges backwards where smaller numbers are larger, but they did. So in my truck, I use 6 gauge because it's underneath the hood. It's only like 10 feet of wire away. It's not that far. I haven't had any issues with voltage drop. Okay, so now let's go to the solenoid. So what is a solenoid? A solenoid is basically a little device that connects and disconnects this wire right here that is connecting the 2 positives of the battery. So how it works is you're going to have a wire off of this into your fuse box. I'll draw that in a moment, but wire comes off of this, connects in your fuse box. When you turn the key of your truck, it connects these wires. So your alternator is charging both the starter battery and the second battery through this circuit right here. Now, when you turn your engine off, take the key out, this disconnects. So now you're only drawing power from the second battery. So if you kill your second battery, the starter battery was not connected to that. So this is fully charged. You can still start your vehicle just fine. So you're going to find 2 types of solenoids. One's going to have a post for a negative, like any other electronics. And what you're going to do is ground that again to the frame. We're just going to say all these X's are frames. I'm not going to write frame to everyone, but every X that we draw in black is going to be the frame. So you can ground that to the frame. There's a few ways to do it. You can do it if you end up bolting the solenoid right to some part of your truck that is a frame. You could just run that wire right to a bolt that you bolt that solenoid to. Mine, you'll notice, doesn't have it when I go out and show you. It's self-grounding, so there's no negative terminal on it. Just bolting it into the car, the frame of the truck where it is, grounds it. So if you're going to do it that way, if you get a self-grounding one, you need to make sure the solenoid is connected to a part of the truck that is grounded. Otherwise, it will not work. Then you have your positive that comes off of that. Every solenoid, whether it's self-grounding or not, will have the positive wire. The positive wire is going to go into your fuse panel of your truck or of your vehicle. Into the fuse panel where all the fuses for all electronics in your vehicle are. That's going to go right into there, and you need to find a fuse that only runs when the ignition is started. You need one that when the ignition is not started, it doesn't have power, so the solenoid is not on. Otherwise it won't work, and this will always be connected, and if you kill this battery, you will also kill the starter battery, and you don't want that. But we're going to go out there really quick, and I'll kind of go over how I did that and how it works.
Dual battery system. First battery, starter battery, right here. Second battery, over here, right here. So my truck, a lot of trucks come with 2 battery slots, with the starter being over there, and then they have a spot for a second one here. So I decided to put mine here. Here is my positive that goes off of this battery to the second battery. Here's the fuse. We talk about that. The fuse is in circuit breaker. It's at the end of the video, but just so you see where it is, it's right here. Then this red wire along there goes all the way along there, weaves around, and comes right here. Second fuse to the positive terminal of this battery. Then we have just the negative on this battery, which goes off. And this one's actually connected to, if we can see it, this bolt here, where this cable goes, and it's bolted in there. That's actually a ground for different for electronics somewhere in the vehicle. I'm not sure what electronics they are, but all I did was pop that bolt out and then ground this battery to that same ground. And then the solenoid is under here. So this is the solenoid. As you can see, it is screwed into the frame right here of the truck, which is where other things are grounded. Like this ground is grounded there. This ground is grounded there. So I know it's grounded. Knew it was grounded before I put it there. Worked out. And then the second thing is the part that comes off into the fuse panel right here. So this wire is the positive wire off the solenoid. If you can kind of see, I'm kind of hooking it. This is a fuse panel. I'll pop that off really quick. Fuse panel all out now. Kind of confusing, I know. Looking all in here. This is the wire that came off the solenoid. And basically what I have is a piggyback fuse, which is all it is it basically plugs into that slot. This is what it looks like. You have the original fuse that was in there, which was this bottom one, the red one. And then this top one is for the solenoid. So pretty simple there. All you do is you take the wire off the solenoid, the positive, and crimp it onto the piggyback fuse, and then you put both fuses into this, and then you plug it into the slot. Now, you want to make sure you have this facing the right way. So on mine, it needs to be facing up that way. If I had this turned around where the wire was facing down this way, what would happen is both these fuses would basically be connected. And what happens then is if the bottom fuse blows, then the top fuse will not work, so the solenoid would not work. I don't know why that happens, but when it's facing correctly the way it is, if the bottom fuse blows, the solenoid still will work. So kind of confusing, but you kind of just have to try it both ways. Pull the fuse out, only put the solenoid fuse in, put it in, turn the key in your truck. If it turns on, then you have it facing the correct way. And for the slot I chose, I basically just looked around in here. This is a 2013 Silverado, and I have it in slot 43. Slot 43 on here is miscellaneous ignition. I don't know what that means, what it's controlling, but I know it's an ignition switch. I've tested it, and it works well. So that's it for the dual battery system, and we'll get back inside for some more.
After you have this down, you can start attaching electronics. So off of your second battery, you're going to have positive cable, and you're going to run it to your fuse panel. Right there. Here's your fuse panel. Positive right to it. This gauge wire, once again, is going to depend on how far it is, but what I recommend and what I did was I used this same gauge wire that I used over here. So this, once again, is going to be 4 to 6 gauge wire, most likely. If you're running like a heck of a lot of electronics off this, you're probably going to want to go 4. And if it's really far, you're probably going to want to go 4. If you're not running as much like me, I only run a few things on mine. I go with 6 gauge. I have about 25 feet of wire from the second battery to the fuse panel, so that's a decent ways. For what I do, I haven't seen a problem with using 6 gauge, but 4 gauge, if you're gonna be running more, is what I would recommend. Also, if this is in the back of your truck, your second battery is in the back of your truck, you can get away with a smaller gauge wire here if this wire between the fuse panel and the second battery is really short. Say it's only like a few feet, you could get away easily with a smaller gauge wire, although it is always better to go as large as you can because you will just have less problems with a bigger gauge. Now for the negative of the fuse panel, this is where the grounding to frame really comes into play. So this will be, you could, if you wanted to, connect this negative to the negative of the second battery, but it's just easier to take this negative and once again ground it to the frame. I'll go show you what that is like on my truck. It's just underneath the truck. This is just a short piece of again 4 to 6 gauge wire, and that is run to the frame of the truck. It is bolted to the frame of the truck, and that completes the circuit, right? Because this is bolted to the frame and this is bolted to the frame. They're both connected through the frame, so it completes the circuit and lets everything work. Once you have this down, you basically have the system done. Like, this system will work this way. all you have to do now is you take your fuse panel and you attach your electronics. So I have like 4 USB outlets connected back there. So each one is to the fuse panel. So right there's, let's just say there's 2. We'll just show 2. You got your positive wires going to the fuse panel, and your negative wires go into the fuse panel. Different fuse panels are connected differently, but they'll tell you this is negative and this is positive. Generally on a fuse panel, it doesn't matter which negative post it is connected to. All the negatives go straight to this post, which goes to the ground. These ones can also be connected to any of them because they all go through a fuse and then connect to this one. So all you have to do once you have this connected is determine how many amps are going to be running through this wire based on what electronic you're running, whether it's whatever. These are just USB outlets. USB outlets generally only draw about 3 amps at the most. Usually what you'd put as a fuse here would be a 3 to 5 amp fuse. Say your fuses, so these small ones would be like a 3 or a 5. That's kind of dependent on what it is that you're running in here on your fuse. And it's really nice because if you want to disconnect power from any of these outlets, you just pull the fuse out. So now for the wire to the fuse panel. So it's this wire right here off the positive. I know it's black, but current doesn't care what color is what, so I used black wire to start here. There's an 80 amp circuit breaker, so I can, if I push that, this flips up, breaks the circuit, flip it back, closes the circuit and allows it to run. We'll get to those, or the circuit breakers at the end of the video, but anyways, this wire is the 8 gauge wire or 6 gauge wire I was talking about. It goes up and around right where that red wire is behind it. Then it goes straight down out the bottom of the engine bay and then runs along the bottom of the truck underneath along the frame there in that loom. Then it goes over here. Then it goes over here and goes up underneath right here, goes up underneath and then up through the gap in the bed of the truck, and I'll show you exactly what holes those are when I get up there. Back in the truck now, so we're gonna take a peek at the fuse panel, which is underneath this trap door I got. So looks complicated, it's really not. Here's the ground. The ground goes up over here, and then it goes through a little gap in the truck, which I'll show you in a second. But here's the positive in from under the hood, connected to the positive side, negative to the negative side, and then these are all negative posts. So the negative wire off of every single electronic gets connected to a post in here, and then here are the positives here and here. So then every positive post gets plugged in here, and then so these are all USB outlets. Those only draw at most about 5 amps, so we got a 5 amp fuse for every one of those. And then down here we got the here's the fridge, 20 amp fuse on that. A little high, it doesn't really need one that high, but that's what I got. Then the charge controller is this center one here, 20 amp fuse on that one. And then this one here is the plug-in for my diesel heater that goes down under the truck, 15 amp fuse on that. And where they plug in is on the side. I have these panels here, but we pop it down and look up underneath it. If you can see, there's a hole gap under here, and that goes down underneath the bed of the truck, out the bottom of the truck, so the wires feed up through that hole and then down out that hole too. Okay, so the positive cable or the negative cable goes out the side of the hole underneath the side of the truck, comes down, it's right here, and as you can see, it is bolted in right there to the frame of the truck, so it's grounded right there through that bolt. And then I have my diesel heater wire that hangs down here too, if you're wondering, and I just clipped that right on that negative. wire right there and clip it, unclip it when I need to use it. Okay, and now we're gonna go over the solar panel on there. So like I said, once you have this part of the system done, you can run the thing and it's gonna work. And now, if you wanted to, you can connect a solar panel. You can have this, and it's not a lot harder to connect this. Also reverse, if you had this part, the solar panel, just connected, and you didn't have this second battery hooked up to your starter battery, this would also work, and you could do the reverse. You could have this connected, have this whole system working with the fuse panel and the battery, and then you could connect this later. So it just depends on how you want to do it. You could have one, the other, or both. Your solar panel is going to have a positive and negative cable out of it. Positive is going to go to the charge controller. You need a charge controller. Most solar panels that you buy, if you buy a little kit, they're going to come with some sort of charge controller. This takes the power that's coming out of the solar panel and puts it into the battery at the correct amount, the correct rate. I don't know exactly how they work, but you know, you need this in order to not mess up your battery and for it to charge correctly. So there's different type of charge controllers. This video is not going to be about that. For mine, I just used the one that came with my solar panel. From the charge controller, positive and negative, go into the charge controller. Then out come negative and positive. Now, this is going to be kind of confusing the way I connected it, but it worked better this way, I think. You could take these wires out from this charge controller and wire them straight to the second battery, but then it's not fused, and you have all this long wires going all the way over to the battery. So what you can do is take this charge controller. The ground is going to go right to the negative on the fuse panel, which goes and is grounded to the frame of the truck. And the positive is going to come out and it's going to go into its own fuse in the fuse panel. What that does is it gives your charge controller a fuse, so you can turn it on and off through this, or if you get a surge from the charge controller, it's going to blow out the panel, not mess up your battery. Makes it really simple. I know this looks like it wouldn't work. Current is flowing from here to my electronics, but then current is also flowing from this side into the battery. Yes, that's exactly how it works. Current will flow both ways on these wires. It doesn't really matter. Like this system is what I do. It works very well. Okay, now we're going to go over circuit breakers and fuses. So I know I've kind of left this out, even though it's very, very important. And I showed you some of them when I was outside going over these things. I wanted to wait to the end so you could kind of grasp this concept first before we threw in the different fuses. So obviously the easiest ones are in the fuse panel. You connect your electronics, the positive and the negative. Negative never has a fuse. Fuses or circuit breakers are always on the positive. So really simple, right? Positive wire goes in, and you know you had to put the correct size fuse there for whatever electronic or wire you're using there. But on these big wires, you need to put the correct fuse or circuit breaker also. So really quick, circuit breakers and fuses, they do the same thing, right? So you have too much charge and they break. The fuse busts and breaks. The circuit breaker flips open and breaks the circuit. I recommend on these big wires, you get circuit breakers, because a circuit breaker, when it blows, can just be reset, right? A fuse, when it blows, you have to replace it. So the circuit is overloading and you blow a fuse and you don't know why it's overloading. You put a new fuse in, it blows again. You still don't know, you put a new fuse in, they just keep blowing, and you're just blowing out fuses, and you just have to keep buying more. Where the circuit breaker, you just close it and it opens up, close it, open, close, open, until you figure out what the problem is. On my system, there is 4 main circuit breakers. In the 2 battery system, there's 2. One right here, right by the positive off the starter battery. One right here, right off the positive of the second battery. If there's a surge here from this battery, it'll blow the fuse right here and not fry this battery. If there's a surge here, it'll blow right here and not fry this battery, right? Really simple. When you do these ones, when you do these fuses, this fuse is to protect the wire. It is not to protect the electronics. It is to protect this wire from overloading. So you fuse it based on how many amps this wire can handle. So mine, I use 6-gauge wire. Like I said, 6-gauge wire can handle about 75 amps of current. So I put 80 amp fuses on mine. That's what I put on mine. I know that's a little above what this wire can handle, but it's not much, and I just don't see it really ever that really happening. And if it does surge, usually it surges more than just 5 above. It's going to surge a lot and blow those fuses. I put fuses in, but I would recommend buying circuit breakers, because I got the fuses for it before I did the rest of it, and circuit breakers obviously would be better, but luckily I've not blown a fuse yet. And these fuses are like $8 each, so I don't want to just be blowing them. Hopefully you never need them, but put them in there just in case, because if something does go wrong, you do want this circuit to break. Then second, and this one is the one that I would say is probably the most important and most convenient, and you definitely want this to be a circuit breaker, is from the second battery to the fuse panel. You get a circuit breaker right there. This is once again an 80. Also, once again, I know it's slightly above what this cable is rated for, but for me, it works fine. If you're worried about it, get a 75 amp one and you should be good, or even a 70. This is a circuit breaker. As I showed you out on the truck, you disconnect and reconnect this very easily. So I have had this blown before, and it was really nice because it blew, and then I was able to find out what had blown it and reconnect it. Whereas if it was a fuse, I would have had to put a new fuse in. And when I was trying to find what was blowing it, I couldn't find it for a while. I would have blown out a ton of fuses at like $5 to $8 each trying to figure out. Whereas the circuit breaker, it just opens and closes easily. Also really nice as well, because if I just want to shut all the power off to the back here, I just open this circuit breaker right here. I just open it and it shuts off all of the power to the back, and nothing in the fuse panel can get any power. But when you do that, you need to be careful. This solar panel, as long as it's up there, it's always getting sun on it, as long as there's some sort of sunlight on it. So it is always putting charge into the charge controller. You do not want this to be happening if the charge controller is not on. We got another circuit breaker right here on the positive that I showed you, and this one for this is a 30. This is 10-gauge wire that I have. 10-gauge wire can handle 30 amps, so we have a 30 amp cutoff, and that's also very convenient because my charge controller is a 30 amp charge controller. It can handle up to 30 amps. So that's why I chose 10-gauge wire, because these pair very well together, where the circuit breaker that's on there both protects the charge controller from the solar panel and the wire. Also, like I said, if the charge controller is not on, not getting power from the main battery, you don't want the solar panel just putting power into it. If I ever have to shut this off, I first disconnect this circuit breaker so the solar panel is just sitting up there, not providing power to anything, because the circuit is off.
So here's the charge controller for the solar panel. So it tells you on this type of controller, it tells you, or most of them, they tell you where in. So you get the positive and negative from the panel in, and then the positive and negative out, which goes to the battery. You can see the battery symbol there, but we just thread it right into the fuse block. The fuse block is connected through these wires right to the battery, so it's the same thing. Connecting it there is essentially connecting it to the battery, and it runs and works really well. From the controller, the wires come out, the positive and negative go up here. They run along the top of the shelf here in this cable keeper, and then here is the circuit breaker to the solar panel. 30 amp circuit breaker. Push this to break the circuit. If I'm not running it, I want it off. Do that and then close it. Runs along here, goes through the third brake light, out the third brake light, and right into the panel here. So pretty sweet setup right there. Works really well. Okay, so that's about it. I think I got everything explained pretty well there. As far as like the cables to the back, said I recommend a big gauge cable, and I used a 6-gauge cable. Basically, if you really want to know what gauge cable you need, one, always go bigger than you need, but add up all of the amp draw that you're going to be getting from your electronics back there. So for me, that's the main one is the diesel heater, draws about 10 amps when it's warming up, heating up. That is what draws the most by far. Then the fridge will draw about 5 amps when it's running. The only other things are the USB outlets, and the things that I plug into that really only draw like an amp or less. So let's just say for some reason 4 things are plugged in, so call it 5 amps to make it easy. So that comes out to about 20 amps is the most that will be drawn at once. 6-gauge cable is rated for 75 amps. So obviously we're well within that range, plus we're way within that range. So we're gonna really do well on not having very much voltage drop. So the fridge and the diesel heater are 2 things that are recommended to be connected directly to the battery, not through a fuse panel. I connected them through a fuse panel, I know, but I don't have a lot of cable running to it, and it's big cable. It's very thick, large gauge cable, and so I think they recommended that because usually I think people are using smaller gauge cable. There is voltage drop in the back. I'll usually read like 12.6 volts, and then the fridge will read 12.4 volts. Same with the diesel heater, you'll have 0.2 volt dropped, which has not been an issue at all for me. So if I do end up getting too much of a voltage drop and it's at night, the solar panel's not working obviously because there's no sun, and the truck isn't running because I'm back there about to sleep, what I'll do is either get out and start the truck and let it run for about 10 minutes, or my truck has remote start. I'll just stay in the back, remote start it. When I remote start, it runs for 10 minutes and then shuts off automatically. So that's enough time to give it enough juice to charge up the battery so it will last all night. And generally when I'll do that is I'll only do that when I first cut the diesel heater on, because it draws about 10 amps as it heats up, and then after that it only draws about 1 amp an hour, like very little. So that's it. I hope that covered most of it. I'm sure I missed something, but whatever. If I missed stuff, leave some questions in the comments and I'll answer them.